God bless you. God bless you, everybody. And welcome to this new post for today, the 29th. And good morning and good afternoon, depending on the time that you're watching this video. And in this, I want to be very concise and don't want to take much of your time because we live in a society now that if something lasts more than 12 minutes, people already they lose interest. So I'm going to be very concise on what I'm going to say at this moment. But I don't know whether you guys are aware of what's going on in Canada. Well, Canada is a whole new frontier when it comes to the current ideology that is permeating through society. And but I was watching this news. This pastor was taken to jail. He had handcuffs and everything, as though he was a criminal. And his crime was to read from scripture, something that society today does not accept. And it's very, very strange times that we are living in. And why do I say strange time? Because what is perceived as reality by one person is not reality for the other person. If I have a box and within that box I have a tissue inside, and there is me and another person, and we um, take a guess of the color of the tissue inside the box, and I say that the tissue is white, and the person opposing my point of view says black, there is only one way to find out who's right and who's wrong. And the only way to find out who's right and who's wrong is going into the box and actually looking at the reality of the tissue, whether it's white or whether it's black. And that would tell us who's right and who's wrong. And when they open the box and the tissue is actually white, then obviously the other person was wrong and the other person was right. But what happened when truth is no longer valid? The fact that the tissue is white, the other person can merely say where what is looks white to you is no longer white to me. And so now we are distorting reality. In a sense, we can never come to an agreement. In a sense, this is a society that can no longer look at facts, no longer look at what's real and come to a solution because now reality is no longer the validation for an argument. Facts are no longer validation for an argument. Nowadays, you can have your point of view. Actually, I have seen a news clip where it says that if you say that 2 plus 2 is equals to 4, that might be racist. I don't know whether that was a meme, but it looked as though it was actually a news station where this was taking place. So I don't think it was a meme. But what I'm trying to say is that the fact that the tissue within the box was actually white does not solve the issue to who was right and who was wrong. Obviously, in a perfect world, in a world where we look at reality as something that is tangible and can be quantified, or not just quantified, but we can report to decide what's real and what's not, and it's no longer valid, then what is the end goal? Where are we going to? If this is going on now, where do we see ourselves in 10, say 20 years? It's just an impossibility, really, to live in this sort of society when reality and truth are no longer um, the bastion that we look at to prove a point. It's just no longer, not anymore. And so the reason that I say this is because what was going on in Canada, and we see that um, reality is being distorted so much that a person can be reading the Bible and stating what is in the Bible, and because of that, is taken to jail. Obviously, having to do with the sexual ideology that has risen in the last, obviously, way more than 30 years, but really has been formidable in the last 8 years. It's been prevalent the last 8 years. And I want to go to Daniel chapter 10, and he says, verse 11, and he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. When he said to me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humble yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand that is what is to happen to your people in the latter days. For this vision is for days yet to come. Why do I read this to you? And that is in the book of Daniel. Because the book of Daniel is actually telling us about the spiritual world, the spiritual realm, which are we're not privy to unless God allows us to do so. And the person that is giving a message to Daniel, he is telling Daniel, the king of Persia withstood me for 21 days. Now, let us not be confused as to what's going on here. What is going on here is that the spiritual being, the spiritual um, power that was ruling over Persia is what this angels is referring to. It's not referring to the actual person that is sitting on the throne of Persia, but it's talking about the spiritual entity that is actually playing the king of Persia as a puppet. In other words, the king of Persia does not see this, but his decision, what he does, is actually being controlled by the spiritual entity that is controlling the king of Persia, or there is in Persia. This is what the angel is alluding to. The ability for Daniel to see this angel that is giving him this message is because God allowed him to do so and to actually hear him. But the spiritual reality is actually more prevalent than the physical one. And I would say that everything that you see in the physical reality is the result of what has happened in the spiritual one. We see mobs nowadays. In Chicago, you see people rioting. You see people, it's a whole bunch of group of people, black teenagers beating up a white lady. That is the physical reality that what we can see, but what we cannot see is what happened in the spiritual world that is actually controlling those kids into doing those sort of things. And so this angel said that the king of Persia withstood him or fought him for 21 days, and the angel Michael had to come and help him. Now, how does that align to what we're seeing today in Canada with Prime Minister Justin, and and also to Joe Biden here in the United States and in Europe with everybody in England mostly? What we see going on there is crazy as well. Just the news, I was looking at this video where a teacher is threatening a student saying, You have to learn the LGBTQ ideology. It's not up to you. You have no say in the matter. So obviously, something is going on that goes beyond what we merely see. We cannot escape reality. How can we explain the fact that a man can do whatever he wants to his body, or a woman can do whatever he wants to her body, but yet they remain being a man or a woman? Yet the general consensus, I wouldn't say the general consensus, many people are still base their decisions on reality, is that they actually can transgender. Even feminists are now supporting this idea that a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man. Obviously, the women are losing this battle because we don't see transgender women, or I'm sorry, transgender men going into men's sport. We don't see that. Why? Because they know they're going to be beat. Is the transgender women, they're actual men going into female sports. For some reason, the feminists are allowing this. We would have thought that we up in arms against this. But the kingdom of the darkness cannot be divided. That's why we see things that are supposed to be against each other, that for some reason they are being accepted between these communities. So we already see in the book of Daniel the reality of what's going on. We see that there is a dark side that is not visible by human eyes, but that it does operate. Now I want you to go with me to Second Corinthians chapter 4. The verse 3 says, "And even our gospel is veiled. It is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God." So notice what he's saying here. The God of this world, who is that? Satan. He has veiled, he has blinded the people. This is why I take the napkin out of the box and it's obviously white, but the other person cannot see it because his lens is being blocked. He's no longer has light in his eye to see reality. They actually believe that a person can be non-binary, don't have any gender. They actually believe that a man can be a woman can be a man, and this is permeating through society like a virus because there is a God of this world, Satan, that is working to blind these people. And this is why we are lost for words when we see what's going on nowadays. When we see these men dressed as women having shows for little children and reading to little children, and the mothers are taking the children for that, to see that. Like there is any learning to be done by that. Why can't you take your kids and you yourself can read to your kids? You don't have to have a drag queen reading to your child. But we see this being pushed into society. We see in school this ideology being pushed. Why? Joe Biden called himself a Catholic, but his beliefs are completely opposed to what the Bible states. He actually called what was happening in California as a sin, when what he was proposing was the sinful solution. He encourages, he is backing this agenda of people. Men believing themselves to be women, and vice versa. Men or women thinking that they don't have any gender. There are over 200 genders out there. How can a thinking society, a reasoning society, believe that? Unless they are being blinded, unless something else is going on behind the curtains that cannot be seen. And I believe Satan is doing whatever he can in these last days to completely confuse people. This new generation, they're going to have it even worse, because you see sometimes transgender men with transgender women and a third party raising kids, and all of a sudden those kids that they are raising identify themselves also a non-binary, transgender, and so on and so forth. Surprise? So obviously, what we see in this day, homosexuality, transgenderism cannot produce offsprings. You cannot have an homosexual couple, I'm sorry, having kids. You cannot have a transgender person having kids. They basically done. It stops. The only way for them to reproduce themselves is to teach our kids their lifestyle. God bless you.